I hear you. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh my God, thank you for saying yes.
I'm curious though, why? Why did you invite me? If you can say just 1 second on that.
Sure. Because we've never chatted in video before. We've only been text friends on the internet for a while now. Because I know that you like to throw spicy thoughts into conversation.
Okay.
And I thought it would be interesting for us to chat about something in the vein of software teams.
Okay. Why
did you accept?
I mean, talking with Denise, right? No, I accept because it seems funny. Seems fun, kind of like an experiment to do. And thank you for that. What would bring you joy right now? What is sparking life in you to discuss?
Well, okay, so for full disclosure for everyone watching it, Romeu and I did a little bit of plotting beforehand, and we have some topics in mind that we might, I think we should just kind of riff and see if we stumble upon them organically. One thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is what good looks like in terms of a high collaboration, high trust team. So I've read, and I'm sure you have as well, I've read all the standard literature on psychological safety on teams, not just software teams. And this is sort of like work done around teams more generally. And I'm trying to understand now, and I've also, read the literature about the Tuckman stages of development, where the idea being every time you take a bunch of people and you throw them together onto a new team, that group of people goes through a couple stages before they can be considered a gel team. So I think it goes forming, storming, norming, performing, which is really hard to say and hard to remember. But I've kind of been thinking a lot about what are the behaviors, what are the values, maybe what are the individual beliefs and group beliefs that can accelerate a team through those stages and get to the point where you're a cohesive unit of, I don't want to say of productivity, that just makes us sound like we're code generating robots, but to a point where a team understands what they're here, what their mission is, what they're here to build, and gets really good at delivering that thing.
And why are you interested in that at all? What is the thing behind that interest? What sparks interest in that?
The reason why I'm thinking about this right now is because my team at work is doing an experiment around team building. So we are a 20 engineer and then 4 or 5 product managers, 4 or 5 designers. So we're a 30-person unit. And within that 30-person group, we're organized into 4 or 5 sub-teams. The idea being that people should be able to rotate pretty freely between the sub-teams. So what I'm interested in exploring right now is how do we make those sub-teams, given that there's going to be an expected higher level of churn than you would normally have on a software team. I think normally, and it's different for every organization, but normally you can expect to work with the same people on the same project for at least 6 months, right? If not 9 months or a year. But I feel like around 6 months is the normal, and like people will quit and leave the company in that time, and that's normal. But you would try to consciously keep a bunch of people together for at least that time. So that's what my current team is doing away with. We don't want to have that stickiness if there is a business need to invest more resources here or there, shift people around, move around domain experts to support. For example, there's one person in this group who's been at the company for a long time. He knows a lot about site reliability engineering. He knows a lot about performance. He knows a lot about resilience engineering. So that person, might have to be moved around a little bit more often so that he can consult on, these kind of high visibility tasks.
I see. So I see 2 things living there. One thing about the rotation itself, which is already a problem, and in general in teams, the safety part and fostering it and making this happen, right? And for the, I could share personally that I have been in a team that I found very successful that actually did this whole rotation sub-teams thing. By successful, so I mean that we did have safety, we did have a lot of intimacy, a lot of togetherness, if we would say like that. And what we did at the time, I don't know if it's applicable to you, but what we did at the time, if that's interesting to you, is we spent at least 3 months in each subgroup, and the rotation between the subgroups would never rotate more than half of the people in the subgroup, right? So the people stayed a little bit on it, and it kept rotating. And what we also did is that subgroups were specifically on trying to produce one major thing, and we have one subgroup that was there to handle the randomness of life, the richness of life itself. And people will also not spend their whole life in that group, just rotate on that. And when somebody arrived at the whole group, that was mandatorily the first group they went. They just went to the group that got the randomness in it. That's what we tried. And it actually worked quite fine for us. I don't know if it's repeatable.
Yeah, so I've also been on teams like that in past past lives, past software jobs. And I've never really been able to figure out, is it one person's, is it a personality thing? Is it broader value alignment from the company? So imagine that one team is, I don't know, this is maybe a weird direction to go with this conversation, but have you ever heard the phrase, cucumbers don't, I'm gonna mess up this quote for sure. Cucumbers don't cucumber the brine, but the brine pickles the cucumber.
Yes, and my answer is always, if you put a piece of shit into the brine, it becomes shit.
And everything else also becomes shitty.
Right? Immediately. So
yeah, but that's like the pessimistic way to express this, right? The idea being, if you have an organization that's toxic, where you have a culture that's unsupportive, and you throw more bodies at it, everyone is just going to absorb the wider culture. But I think that the idea of like rotating people around teams is very, very powerful. And I wish that every organization was healthy enough that you could do something like what you described, rotate people every 3 months.
Yeah. Yes, I do believe that in the organization we did it. There are many ingredients that I have not talked about. Yes, if I look back to it, people were at a high level of maturity, that's for sure, which is not good per se, but it was part of the environment. People were free, right? We said we were self-organized already, so we decided to do that by ourselves. And there was no person ordering us to do it, right? It was something that the group decided to do. And we had no bosses, everything was decided as a group too. So that was already very present in the group we did that. And also we had control of what we were going to do, right? We decided what are the things we think bring value, and the things we decide then to do, and the things we'll deliver, and things like that. Everything like that was on the team power to decide. So I believe those things actually contributed to a lot of friction going away to that endeavor. But then it brings down to safety itself, right? And let's talk about that then. Because one of the reasons why we were safe is that it was a very homogeneous team, right? It was
in terms of experience level, in terms of demographics, in terms of, what do you mean by that?
In terms of basically clones, right? Basically clones, right? In terms of experience, in terms of demographic, in terms of white cis men, hetero. I don't know if they're all heteros, but white cis men. in terms of privilege, in terms of being rich, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a level playing field. And I do believe that the techniques of agility were created by people in the pre-level playing field on a privilege basis. And they apply quite well when you have that level playing field, and they have some fragility when you have to take into consideration everything else.
Yeah. I think so I hear that from a lot of people. When I did an experiment at work a couple months ago where I was trying to develop an internal team health check project. And to do that, I had to gather a lot of data. I had to interview people about the best teams that they've been on. And one of the questions I asked to everybody who was part of this was, tell me about the best team you've been on. Tell me about who else was on it. Tell me about what characteristics of this team do you remember? And homogeneity is one of the things that sticks out in my mind as being a consistent theme across all responses. In those cases, it wasn't always demographic homogeneity. It was more, the theme I heard more often was everybody on the team was equally senior. Everybody on the team had been at the company for roughly the same length of time. We came in with built-in respect for each other. And I think it's cool that demographics are not part of that. These teams were actually quite diverse. They had women, they had people of color on them, people who were earlier and later career relatively, but like still considered senior engineers at this company. And I think like that, that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to establish that, but by the same token, that's a shame, right?
It's awful, right? It is awful. I mean, it is the dearth of many things, and it is a shame that what the places we succeed is the places where we have that. Then we need to find, but what to do? Do you have something?
How do we create that environment where people can successfully switch? So I use switch teams as kind of I don't think that should be the end goal, but I use that as a measurement, as a kind of litmus test, right? So if you feel safe switching teams to any other team in the organization, that theoretically opens up the possibility that you can there's nothing holding you back from going to work on a different part of the product that you're more interested in. So you can more easily align maybe your career growth goals, maybe your interest areas with that part of the organization without fear that you're going to have to start over socially, that you're going to be an environment where you don't feel safe speaking your mind or contributing your opinion. What I'm really interested is in figuring out a robust and scalable way to reproduce that level of safety on every team, regardless of who's on it, regardless of experience level, regardless of demographics. I think that's a really, really tall order. I don't expect us to solve this in the next 17 minutes, but we can talk about it.
But let's talk about the tall order. What, in your experience, is difficult today living that for yourself? I can tell you my difficulties. Do you want them?
Yeah.
Please tell me yours.
So I look back on the teams where I felt like I could be as spicy as I wanted to be. And I think one common characteristic of those teams was there was at least one other person on the team who was also willing to be spicy. And by that, I just mean that I didn't have to be the person who was constantly disagreeing by myself. There was at least one other person in the group who, so I'll use my friend Chris as an example. At my second job, I work with a guy named Chris James. And he is a hilarious human being, and he was a great mentor to me. But the spiciest thing that he said in like week 3 or 4 of working at this company was, we should not have QAs block deploys to production anymore. We should practice continuous delivery. And to everybody else at this, relatively old school, it wasn't a technology company. It was a digital publishing company that had a technology platform. And so people were like, pushing code straight to production, we can't have that. Our business will collapse if we just let the engineers do whatever they want. And I'm characterizing it a little bit unfairly now. I'm just not going to name names. But it's having at least one person in the room who says, the way that we're doing things today can be improved. I'm going to throw the suggestion out there. I'm going to go to bat for the suggestion. And part of it is that he truly did believe that continuous delivery would work for our team and for our product. But I think a little bit of the other part was that he wanted to start modeling what it meant to disagree loudly.
Create, if I understand you right, is the action of creating a space where disagreements are normalized, and hence,
yes,
by finding a place where I will not be hurt if the disagreement fails. I create I create a little bit risk to create disagreements, so we practice disagreeing, so we can disagree on other stuff.
Exactly. You build up the practice of disagreeing, and you probably need to start by disagreeing about professional. Actually, you probably should generally only disagree about professional things that affect the team. Things like, let's do
continuous. Agree on that. Okay.
Yeah. Or like, a more common example I think that a lot of people in London talk about is, I want my team to practice TDD or BDD, or I want my team to refactor, or whatever it is. And sometimes these things are, politically loaded things to push for, unfortunately.
So yes, okay, understand. Creating a disagreement, so in order to get to the point where you can test. As I see that does ties down to many of my difficulties, right? One of my difficulties is that I do believe people are not very good at saying no. Is not very. Consent is a difficult thing in our society and remains difficult in the marketplace, and so people tend to say yes to things they want to say no. They tend to say false yeses, and they tend to, there's a frequent thing, or they tend to say a no that comes with a lot of cost to themselves and things like that.
Yeah.
Or then they get used to saying no all the time. They just say no because, well, that's another problem. And
you're the no guy, right? After a little while.
And becomes an identity, right? So that was a joke. That was a, sorry, no people. Sorry, no people. And I do believe that's one. And another very biggie, right? We will not solve this one in minutes, but I think another big difficulty of mine is that people are not very clear on what they need, right? It's the eternal Spice Girls question, right? Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. and it's there, right? It's hard to answer for most people. It's very hard. They are not connected. They answer a random thing, and when you put those two together, not very clear on what I want and not very clear on being able to say no, you get to this friction of I cannot know when people accept what I propose, if they are accepting because they accept, if they really consent, if I'm taking care of them or not. It's a real difficult for me to feel that we had safety. And so what I try myself to do is to get that no, to push up to the point where I see that person was able to put some limit to something and backtrack from there.
Yeah, but I think the ability to say no, or maybe just to communicate authentically and honestly, is also, power dynamics figure into that hugely, right? Because like early career, I never would have said no to anyone. If someone was like, oh, can you work can you, do this extra thing? It'll take you 3 or 4 extra hours beyond the end of the workday. I probably would have said yes. And that's not because I was being too nice. It was not because I, thought it was the right thing to do or anything like that. It's because I thought that was a calculated yes, right? I thought that was a yes in exchange for more social rapport later.
Transactional yes.
Yeah, I thought it was a transactional yes. In most cases, it was just me being a sucker. That transaction never happened. But I think like that, that perhaps is why, like on teams that have people with mixed privilege, right? People with different levels of access to power and access to influence, like building that kind of environment where people can equally say no is very, very difficult.
Yes. I don't know if it's possible in our current society. Yes, it is. And hence, what do we do when we don't have that, right? We want to create foster safety, but we don't have equality. And that's one of my biggest struggles in life. Right now, since the beginning of this conversation, one thing that is always in the back of my mind is, am I taking all the space? I don't know. Right? And it takes a toil, right? When you try to take this in consideration, it is burdensome, right? It's just, what would you do in order to, if you could do anything, not in our current situation, but if you have consent from the people that you work with, if it was magically consented, what would you put in place in order to increase that safety with them?
That's a really good question. So my brain immediately reached for something interesting, and I'm just going to say what that is, but I don't fully believe in this idea. So my brain instantly went to anonymous input as a device. And so the reason why I think my brain went there is because I think back to this study in social science where they used to, I think it was the Berlin Philharmonic or the London Symphony or some symphony orchestra, I don't remember which one, started conducting their auditions blind. So they had all the musicians play behind a curtain, and then the judges assessed the musician only on the quality of that audition performance. And the end result was more women made it into the orchestra that year than in previous years. So I think that can't be perfectly replicated in software. Like, I wish it were possible to, and people have experimented with this, right? People have tried to make pull requests anonymous, change the names of, anonymize who committed code or whatever like that. But that's kind of boiling someone's contribution down to lines of code written or, an artifact of their work rather than the entirety of their work.
Kind of limiting for our job, yeah.
Exactly. I don't think you can be anonymous. Like if you're on a fully distributed team and you only communicate in text, you could do some weird thing, but it wouldn't feel like being on a team, right? No. If that was the case, it would be a bunch of random people in a chat room together. So I don't think anonymity is it. I don't know what the right answer is.
I'm not asking for a solution because that would be, I believe, very unfair to ask. I'm asking for a deep-seated desire, even if it doesn't solve the problem. Tomorrow, if they could accept anything for you to feel safer, to try, experiment, doesn't mean that it should work, just to try. What would you like to try?
I think a pretty wild experiment would be within an organization. What if you just asked everyone, what do you want to work on? Who do you want to work with? What team do you want to work on? And just see where the preferences fall and then build teams along those. And just create a way for people to make those expressions completely safely. Like just say there's no social political repercussions if you say, I want to report to this other person who's not my current manager.
Oh.
I don't know, but I also don't, this is kind of the, I don't know, maybe that commits the free market fallacy of like assuming that people have perfect information, which they don't.
Right, but it doesn't need to work, it's just experiment would like to try, right? And in your ideal scenario, you would like to be able to connect with people on what do they desire, each one desires to create as a structure, and which one desires to create as a product, and what each one desires to go, in order to convince, to secure yourself that you are working with people that want to be there.
Yeah, I think of all the problems that you can solve in terms of people being dissatisfied with their team, one of the, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this later, but one of the easier problems to solve is mismatch in career growth the career growth skills that you want versus the career growth opportunities that are available. So what I mean by that is like, say that you are, 3 years into software development and you know that the thing you need to work on is improving at design, software design, like implementing design patterns or whatever. If you're on a project where you're writing the same thing over and over and over again, you're not going to get those skills. You need to be on a different project or a different team, maybe in a different organization. That's a pretty easy problem to solve compared to, I don't feel safe disagreeing with the people who are currently on my team, or I don't feel comfortable raising my concerns to the person who manages me. So I don't know, maybe I'm reaching for low-hanging fruit here. Maybe I'm trivializing the problem a little bit.
Thank you for that.
What would you do? What magic wand would you choose to wave and make true?
Oh yeah, I'll probably. I mean, if I have a little magical wand, right? Because if everything hands out was possible, I'll probably fight capitalism itself and productivism itself. But within the constraints of my company, I would say that the thing I would love to is get people to at least exercise vulnerability between us. At least exercise practicing saying the stuff to each other that this is what we need, and propose an hypothesis to each other that this is what I thought we needed, and get to the point where we connect. I have this naive, and it's a very romanticized and naive perception, I accept, that although connection is not enough to destroy privilege, I think nothing is. I do think that connection make the suffering less problematic, right? Make the path more comfortable for everyone, and does so because, in my opinion, if you are aligned that what you are doing right now is clear to you, who are you taking care of and what need are you taking care of, and it's clear to you that maybe it's not your ideal thing to live, but you feel that it's being a sincere compromise of everyone, then you suffer less than when you don't see those things in place. Does it make sense? Or is this too abstract?
Yeah, that makes sense. It is very abstract. I think I'm following.
Okay. For example, I don't know how much time you have left. I will just try to give an example, but I don't know if we have enough time to give that example.
We have enough.
Okay. With my better half, she used to give me she in the beginning of our couple, she used to ask me for visibility, right? She was to ask me for, when are you arriving home, when I was out? And I convinced myself, that was the story in my head, I convinced myself that the reason for that was that she wanted to have more time with me. And hence, being somebody that is very badly organized and kind of a Brazilian, when I say that I arrive towards midnight, means that I will leave between 1 hour before or after midnight from the place I am, right? Something like that. Being the chaotic person I am, I was not very easily given visibility. And she was pissed, and I was sad, and it created this whole cycle, right? Up until the moment where I understood that it was not because she wanted to maximize time with me that she wanted visibility. It's that she wanted to plan the time she had alone. And that clarity there takes time and takes being able to talk about those things. So it takes about, you have the discussions you have the discussions about the discussions you have. In order to create this moment where we slow down enough to really get, okay, this is the thing you are taking care of. What to take care of is not maximizing time with me. What to take care of is that you want to plan the time you have alone. That I can easily take care of, right? And I do get an impression that this is incredibly frequent. We are in a kind of this incredible